Hello everyone, tonight we begin on the steep and crumbling slopes of Mount Olympus, where golden clouds roll past marbled columns and divine egos loom larger than the mountain itself. The air is thin, but thick with tension. You can almost hear the hiss of Hera's disapproval, the low rumble of Zeus polishing his next thunderbolt, and the unmistakable clang of Hephaestus angrily hammering something for the 6th time today. You're not just a visitor up here, you're a fly on the palace wall of the most dysfunctional family in all mythology. And trust me, it's not a sitcom. It's a storm. You're about to watch immortals bicker over dinner, hold grudges for centuries, and casually ruin the lives of mortals for sport. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop a comment with your location and your local time. Let's see how many sleepy travelers are joining us from across the world tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step softly through clouds and into a gleaming hall that should feel sacred, should feel holy. But it doesn't. Not quite. The gods of Olympus aren't radiant beings of pure goodness. They're not even particularly wise. They are raw power trapped in very human shapes, behaving in very human ways, just with a lot more lightning and way fewer consequences. At the head of it all is Zeus, sky god, king, serial overreactor. The kind of guy who throws a thunderbolt at someone stealing a goat but forgets to RSVP to his daughter's temple opening. He's got that commanding presence, broad shoulders, dramatic beard, a voice like rolling thunder, and yet half the gods seem to roll their eyes when he enters. You can't blame them. Most of their problems began with him. And then there's Hera, his queen. Regal poised and visibly restraining herself from smashing a golden goblet against the wall. You can feel the years of marriage tension clinging to the air like burnt incense. She smiles without showing teeth, speaks without blinking, and definitely knows about Zeus's latest escapade involving a swan and a shepherdess. Historians still argue whether Hera genuinely loved Zeus or if she just hated losing him to anyone else. The rest of the divine family shuffles into the room like attendees of an ancient holiday dinner where no one really wants to be there. Athena sits stiffly, arms crossed, glaring at Ares across the table. Apollo checks his reflection in a polished shield. Dionysus swirls wine in a goblet the size of a toddler. Artemis glares at everyone who isn't an animal. Hermes paces with the energy of someone late to a prank. It's divine chaos wrapped in gilded robes. You follow a golden-haired servant, likely an unlucky demigod, who barely dodges a thrown goblet as Ares starts yet another argument. "You never show up to battle?" he yells at Apollo. "I am the sun," Apollo replies. "I show up every morning." Somewhere Hephaestus mumbles something bitter about being left out again. Even Hestia, who usually keeps out of things, is rubbing her temples like someone who just realized the hearth is also a metaphor for burning patience. And if you think this family meal is bad, you haven't even seen what happens when they visit Earth. Down there, the Greeks are busy lighting fires, sacrificing goats, and building temples in the hope that someone will throw them a miracle, or at least not a curse. They imagine the gods as noble, just fair. Up here, you're watching Athena try to stab her brother with a fork over a chess match. Not even metaphorically. Quirky fact. The gods didn't eat like humans. They dined on ambrosia and drank nectar, mythical substances that granted immortality. No one knows what they really tasted like. Some ancient poets describe it as honeyed perfume. Others suggest it might have been so potent one drop could kill a mortal from sheer delight. Or diarrhea. historians still debate. And as for those big thrones made of gold and ivory, very uncomfortable. More decorative than practical. Apparently sitting for eternity wasn't ergonomic even for gods. As the dinner dissolves into petty spats and half-hearted toasts, you realize something. Mount Olympus is less a divine paradise and more a celestial reality show, where everyone's trying to outmaneuver each other for drama power or revenge. And you're stuck here quietly watching, hoping no one notices you. But they will. They always do. You thought Olympus was chaotic. Wait until Zeus starts changing shape. No, not for fun. Not for strategy. For romance, let's say. Though you quickly learn that word is carrying an awful lot of weight. You trail behind him now through clouds thick with deception as he eyes his next adventure. He spots a mortal woman tending sheep near a riverbank, and within moments, Zeus isn't Zeus anymore. He's a swan, a literal swan. White feathers puffed out wings wide, gliding gracefully toward the startled girl. You blink. Surely this can't be effective. And yet, it is. This is just one in a long list of suspiciously creative transformations. Zeus has also become a golden shower, yes, really a bull and eagle, and possibly most insulting, a humble cuckoo bird. Historians still argue whether these bizarre forms were metaphors misunderstood over time, or if the Greeks genuinely believed their supreme deity could woo women by pretending to be barnyard animals. You follow him across myths and centuries, watching a pattern unfold. Each time he finds a way to bypass Hera's watchful eye by becoming something else. And each time, it still somehow ends in disaster. Take Europa. One sunny afternoon, Zeus spots her collecting flowers. Moments later, he's a majestic white bull kneeling beside her, like a statue come to life. She giggles, pets his horns, and climbs onto his back, whereupon he charges into the sea and swims all the way to Crete. They're surprised the bull becomes a god again, and Europa gets, well, a kingdom and a complex. Or Leda. This one's worse. She's wandering alone when a swan descends from the sky, flapping and crying out. She takes pity. The next thing anyone knows, she's laying eggs. That's right, eggs. Out of which hatch Helen of Troy and her siblings. Talk about family baggage. You begin to suspect that the ancient Greeks weren't telling these stories to uplift their society, but to explain why so many things in the world were already broken. And then there's Danae. Zeus doesn't even bother with feathers this time. He pours himself through her locked chamber ceiling as a literal golden mist. The visual is stunning rays of warm light falling like enchanted sand. But don't let the sparkle fool you. 9 months later, Danae gives birth to Perseus, the one who later slices off Medusa's head. So if you're tracing divine consequences, the line goes mood lighting, demigod, snake lady, beheaded. Some ancient writers suggest that Zeus's transformations weren't just weird flexes, but symbols of power over nature itself. He could become wind flame beast or even starlight, each form a reminder that you were never truly safe from him, no matter how isolated or secure. That's one theory anyway. Others think the poets were just trying to outdo each other for sheer absurdity. And Hera, she knows. Oh, she always knows. But she doesn't yell, not right away. Instead, she plays a longer game. She punishes the women, not her husband. You're starting to realize that gods in Greek mythology aren't driven by love or justice, but pride, vengeance, and something uncomfortably close to boredom. Meanwhile, mortals scramble to keep up. Entire cities are founded in honor of Zeus's romantic conquests. Babies born from these liaisons grow up to become heroes, monsters, or cautionary tales. You'd think someone would have posted warning signs, beware of suspiciously charming animals near water. Quirky fact for the night, Zeus's romantic history inspired more sculptures, poems, and frescoes than any other figure in mythology. Even Roman emperors copied his aesthetic, muscular beard, flowing lightning bolt always at hand. It was peak godcore, a marketing strategy built on chaos and pheromones. You trail after him again as he slips into yet another disguise this time, an eagle soaring over a battlefield, scanning the crowds for, well, someone new. And here's where it hits you. These stories were bedtime tales for some poor Athenian child. Morality plays without clear morals. The king of the gods could do anything, be anyone, and no one could stop him, not even himself. It doesn't make you feel better. It makes you feel small. You look up at the sky, a storm brews, not from weather, but from choice. Somewhere, Zeus prepares another transformation. Somewhere else, Hera sharpens her silence. The drama never ends. You wonder if it ever even began. Now that you've seen Zeus in action, plucking mortals from the fields like a kid picking wildflowers, you might be wondering how Hera responds to all this. Spoiler, not well. But not in the way you'd expect. She doesn't rage like a tempest, throwing plates and screaming across Olympus. No, Hera simmers. She plots. She carves each slight into memory like inscriptions in marble. You watch her now seated on a golden throne, hands folded so tightly her knuckles have turned the color of milk. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. You think she'll confront Zeus' demand fidelity. She doesn't. She tracks down the women. You trail behind her as she descends to Earth Vale, trailing behind her like storm clouds. The moment she arrives in Argos or Thebes or whatever city Zeus's latest beloved happens to be, and people start whispering. Dogs hide, children run. You meet Io first, a priestess of Hera's, ironically enough. When Zeus begins sneaking around her temple, Hera suspects something's off. Zeus panics, turns Io into a shimmering white cow to hide her. Hera raises an eyebrow and goes, "Oh, a cow," for no reason. Then asks for the cow as a gift. Zeus can't say no. So now Io is stuck grazing grass, trying not to moo with anxiety, while Hera posts a 100-eyed monster Argus to watch her every move. Literal eyes everywhere. Eventually, Zeus sends Hermes to kill Argus and free Io. But Hera, she turns Argus's eyes into a constellation, because even her griefs become monuments. Historians still argue whether Hera's fury stems more from betrayal, humiliation, or a twisted sense of justice. Some say she represents the institution of marriage itself, powerful, eternal, and deeply inflexible. You follow her again this time to the home of Semele, a mortal woman pregnant with Zeus's child. Hera disguises herself. She's gotten quite good at it, and befriends Semele as an old crone. "Are you sure that's Zeus?" she whispers. "You should ask him to show you his true form just to be certain." You already know how this ends. Zeus reveals his full godhood. Semele, a mortal, is instantly incinerated by the divine radiance. Just poof. Hera doesn't lift a finger. She doesn't have to. And yet, even in all this divine vengeance, Hera remains complicated. She's not evil. She's hurt, proud, deeply offended by the idea that a king might disrespect his queen in public. So she retaliates the only way she knows, through legacy, by cursing offspring, by laying generational traps. Hercules, the strong man, hounded by Hera his whole life. She sends madness upon him just to see him fail. The irony, his name Heracles, literally means glory of Hera. You don't know whether to laugh or wince. Quirky fact in some fragments of ancient poetry, Hera had her own sacred cows, not metaphorical ones. Literally. She was worshipped in agricultural festivals with herds of white oxen. In these rituals, women played key roles, leading processions, singing hymns, offering honey cakes. It's one of the rare times Hera seems peaceful. But up here back on Olympus, she is anything but. You watch her sit across the dinner table from Zeus, every gesture calculated. She lifts a cup of nectar. He flinches slightly. He knows that look. And you do too. It's the look someone gives when they've forgiven you publicly, but have not forgotten. Modern readers sometimes wonder why the Greeks told stories like this, why their gods were so flawed, so vindictive, so petty. But that was the point. The gods weren't ideals. They were reflections, exaggerated mirrors of humanity, our worst impulses magnified to mythic scale. No tidy endings, no moral high ground. Just Hera, silent and seething, immortal, and bound to the same cheating husband for eternity. You find yourself wondering, is she the villain here, or just the only one who remembers? The wind shifts as you descend from Hera's silent fury into the salty, crashing chaos of the sea. You're now trailing behind Poseidon, god of oceans, earthquakes, horses, and arguably the most dramatic water-based mood swings in recorded myth. He doesn't walk. He strides through waves that part for him like theater curtains, trident glinting under stormlight. His beard is tangled with seaweed, his eyes the color of deep water just before a shipwreck. And his personality, somewhere between beach dad with a superiority complex and a full-blown seaquake. You learn very quickly that Poseidon is not subtle. He builds palaces of coral and gold, rides a chariot pulled by hippocamps. Yes, that's half horse, half fish, and once tried to woo Demeter by creating the first horse. That's right. Horse, as in, you don't like me. Fine, I'll invent an entire species to impress you. Historians still argue whether he succeeded or if Demeter simply left out of confusion. But where Zeus manipulates from the sky, Poseidon lashes out with brute force. You follow him along coastlines where he punishes cities with floods for worshipping the wrong gods. In Athens, he slammed his trident into the Acropolis, cracking the earth open and producing a spring of salty water because, of course, it had to be dramatic and useless. Athena, clever and practical, countered with an olive tree. The people chose her. Poseidon is still salty about it. Literally. He also has a complicated relationship with his siblings. He and Zeus work together to overthrow their father Cronus and draw lots to divide the world. Zeus got the sky Poseidon, the sea Hades, the underworld. And while Hades accepted his role grudgingly, Poseidon never stopped thinking he deserved more. You feel it in the way he paces his palace in the depths, always plotting, always brooding like an emperor stuck with the second-best empire. Quirky fact, in ancient Greek naval rituals, sailors would sometimes throw wine or even live animals into the sea to appease Poseidon before a voyage. The logic, if you're going to sail on his mood swings, you better bring a gift or a bribe. You're now standing on a beach as fishermen look anxiously at the sky. There's no storm cloud, but they feel something brewing. Poseidon's rages often come unannounced. A lover spurns him, the tides go mad. A city fails to sacrifice a bull tidal wave. A mortal builder claims they can construct a seawall better than the god's earthquake. And when he's not wreaking havoc, Poseidon is competitive. He once challenged Athena for control of Athens, we've mentioned, but that wasn't a one-off. He tried to take over Naxos, Delphi, even Corinth. If it had coastline, he wanted it. If it didn't, he'd flood it until it did. You start to notice a pattern. Like the other gods, Poseidon isn't evil. He's insecure, restless, always searching for the reverence he thinks he deserves and furious when it's denied. He even tried to take Olympus once, teamed up with Apollo in a full-on god mutiny. They failed, obviously, and were sentenced to labor on Earth. Their punishment, building the massive walls of Troy. Yep, Poseidon, sea god extraordinaire, forced to pick up a chisel like a common mason. He's never gotten over it. Some myths say he added flaws into the walls on purpose. Others say he cursed the city in advance. Either way, when the Trojan War came knocking, Poseidon was more than happy to help it fall. You now stand on the deck of a creaking wooden ship as sailors whisper prayers. They're not asking for calm seas. They're asking that Poseidon not notice them. Because the worst fate isn't being ignored by the gods, it's being seen. Another quirky tidbit, Poseidon was also the god of horses. Why horses, no one's sure. Some scholars claim it symbolizes control over the untamed waves and stallions alike. Others suggest it's simply the result of Poseidon being assigned way too many job titles. As you stare into the frothing ocean, you feel it, that raw, ancient fear of the deep. Not just drowning, disappearing, being pulled under by something older, angrier, and more powerful than you can imagine. Poseidon doesn't care if you're good. He cares if you respect him. And if you don't, well, he'll remind you, with floods, with tremors, with something big rising from the waves just out of sight. So maybe toss in that wine offering after all. The wind sharpens, biting through your robes as the air shifts from salt and sea foam to bitter frost. You're no longer trailing Poseidon's storm, now you're walking into the quiet, bone-deep chill of loss. You've arrived in Demeter's domain. At first glance, it seems peaceful. Rolling fields, tall stalks of wheat swaying in a soft breeze, bees humming lazily over blossoms. But this isn't serenity, it's stagnation. Because the fields have stopped growing, the trees have gone quiet, the earth has turned inward. And at the center of it all is Demeter, goddess of the harvest, kneeling beside a pile of withered crops, her fingers pressed into the soil like she's trying to summon her daughter from the roots. Her daughter. That's the whole problem. You've heard of Persephone, haven't you? The spring maiden. Flowers blooming in her wake. But here you meet Demeter after Persephone's abduction, after Hades swept her into the underworld in a chariot of obsidian and shadow. Demeter didn't take it well. In fact, she took it personally. She walked away from Olympus, disguised herself, refused to let anything grow anymore. You're standing in a dying village where no crops have bloomed in weeks. Children cry over empty bowls. Livestock grow thin. People are whispering that the gods have turned their faces away. Nope, just one goddess, one mother. And she's not turning back until she gets her daughter. Mainstream fact, this is the myth behind the changing of the seasons. Persephone eats 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld, binding her to that place for half the year. For 6 months, she returns to Demeter, and the world blossoms. For 6 months, she's gone again, and the earth mourns. It's a neat mythological explanation for agriculture's rhythms, and one the Greeks wove into festivals, rituals, and entire cults. But what you don't see on the pottery is this Demeter pacing an empty temple, hair, unbound eyes, ringed with exhaustion, whispering her daughter's name like a prayer and a threat. You see her refusing wine, refusing nectar, refusing company. She's withdrawn from the other gods, from Olympus, from everything but grief. Historians still argue whether Demeter's reaction is symbolic and allegory for maternal devotion, or simply a cosmic tantrum with apocalyptic consequences. Either way, mortals are caught in the middle. And you follow her as she wanders to Eleusis, a small town where in disguise she tries to care for a human child. She anoints him with ambrosia, tries to make him immortal by fire, which, okay, was maybe not the best approach, and when discovered, she burns with fury and sorrow, revealing her divine form. From this moment, the Eleusinian mysteries are born a secret cult dedicated to understanding life, death, and rebirth through Demeter and Persephone's bond. Even Roman emperors wanted in. No one ever fully revealed what happened inside those rites, which frankly is a great way to keep a club exclusive. Quirky fact during the Eleusinian Mysteries initiates fasted, drank a special barley potion called kykeon, and underwent ceremonies that included symbolic death and rebirth. Think of it as the original immersive theater experience, part religion, part existential therapy. And then there's Zeus trying to negotiate between his brother Hades and Demeter. You picture the meeting like a divine HR mediation. Zeus, so, could we maybe split custody, Hades? She already ate the seeds. Demeter glares. Zeus, right. Half the year. That's fair, right? Everyone's happy. No one's happy. But the world spins on. And for 6 months, when Persephone walks the upper world, Demeter rejoices. The wheat returns. The bees dance. The fruit blushes on the vine. And then come autumn, Demeter's face falls. The winds turn cruel again. The fields curl in on themselves. You feel the shift not in the gods, but in the earth. It's more than myth. It's a rhythm. You watch Demeter now as she holds a bundle of early grain, touches it to her lips, and lets it fall. Her eyes are dry, but her silence thunders louder than Zeus ever could. This is what divine heartbreak looks like. The air thickens as you descend below the roots of the world, past the layers of soil, past the bones of forgotten beasts, past the final breaths of empires. You don't fall, you sink. The light dims. The cold becomes personal. Welcome to the underworld. You're not greeted with flames or screaming souls. There's no devil with a pitchfork, just quiet. Stone halls echoing with nothing but your footsteps. The river Styx gurgles nearby, inky, slow, and mean. And seated on a throne carved from volcanic rock is Hades, god of the dead. You half expect a monster, a shadowy reaper, a demon crowned with despair. But Hades just looks tired, polished, formal. He's the only god who never tried to overthrow Olympus, never got caught in scandals, never chased mortals in bird form. He runs the realm no one wants, and he does it with unsettling efficiency, which makes the whole Persephone thing even weirder. You remember that moment when he burst from the earth and kidnapped her in a chariot of night. You want to hate him. And yet, here he is, seated across from her in awkward silence, offering her a pomegranate like it's a peace treaty. Historians still debate whether Persephone fell in love with him or just adapted. Some say she grew into her power. Others whisper that she was tricked into it all. Either way, Hades isn't a villain. He's just unfit for daylight. You trail him through his domain, past the fields of asphodel where average souls wander forever, past Elysium where heroes get their reward, past Tartarus where titans rock, where Sisyphus rolls his boulder again and again and again. Quirky fact, the ancient Greeks didn't believe in a single hell or heaven. Their afterlife was deeply stratified. Good, you get Elysium. Bad, welcome to eternal punishment. Mess, enjoy wandering a gray field for eternity. And here's the kicker: most people ended up in the May category. Hades oversees it all. No drama, no flair, just rules. And maybe that's what made him such a strange outlier among the gods. He didn't seek worship. He didn't demand temples. The few cults devoted to him were small, secretive, and always a bit nervous. You don't pray to Hades. You try not to draw his attention. And yet beneath that aloof exterior, there's a trace of something else. Regret loneliness. He rarely leaves his kingdom. Maybe he can't. Maybe he just doesn't trust Olympus to welcome him. And when he does interact with mortals, it's usually bureaucratic. He's the god of contracts after all. The fine print, the price you didn't know you were agreeing to. You watch him now standing beside a soul freshly arrived. He says nothing, just nods, gestures, and the soul moves on. No judgment, no fire, just placement. You begin to realize this realm is less about punishment and more about order. Nothing escapes Hades, not even time. Then you hear Cerberus. 3 heads, 1 collar, a tail that thumps like thunder on marble. The massive beast lounges near the gates, drooling over a bone that might have belonged to a hero. He doesn't bark. He doesn't growl. He watches. 3 pairs of eyes. No mercy. Quirky tidbit. Some poets describe Cerberus as having 50 heads. Others say he was a puppy with a bark worse than his bite. Either way, you don't test it. Hades walks past him without fear. You pause to wonder, how did this god silent, severe, oddly gentle get saddled with the worst PR in mythology? You start to see it now. It wasn't about evil. It was about association, death, decay, farewell. No one wants to worship a god who reminds them of the inevitable. But Hades, he's not cruel. He's consistent. And as you turn to leave, you feel something press against your shoulder, not a hand, not a claw. Just the weight of inevitability. The reminder that everyone, even gods, eventually fade. Except him. He stays. Forever. You feel warmth again. Not comforting warmth, blazing, spring-loaded slightly, artificial warmth. Like sunlight in a dream, where nothing casts shadows. You've surfaced from the underworld only to find yourself in a meadow that breathes. She's here. Persephone, queen of the underworld, goddess of spring, dual citizen of life and death. And she is not what you expected. She's younger than the other gods, visibly energetically. But there's an edge to her grace, a heaviness behind her eyes that you now understand. For 6 months, she walks among flowers among mortals, among sunlight and river. And for 6 months, she returns to the dark crowned in obsidian, ruling the restless dead. And here's the twist, you're not sure which realm she prefers. You walk beside her now through groves that blossom as she passes. She trails her fingers across tree trunks, and they respond. Petals open. Bees hum louder. Even the wind leans in, but her smile is tight. Thoughtful, because she remembers the chariot, the abduction, the absence of choice. Historians still argue whether Persephone grew into her dual roles willingly or was shaped by centuries of retelling. Was she a kidnapped girl made powerful by circumstance, or a figure who adapted so well to survival that she began to thrive? You'll find temples that honor her only as Kor the Maiden, and others that worship her solely as dread Persephone Queen below. You begin to see she's not split in half. She contains both halves, spring and shadow, bloom and rot. One moment, she kneels beside a stream, braiding daisies into a child's hair. The next, she's gently placing a copper coin on a corpse's lips before its journey across the Styx. You ask nothing. She says nothing. But you feel it, that strange comfort only Persephone can offer. That even the darkest place can belong to someone. Quirky fact, some versions of the myth say she didn't eat 6 seeds, only 1. Others say she ate them on purpose. One obscure source even claims she tricked Hades, knowing the rule to gain access to both worlds. A strategic move cloaked in mythic romance. Ancient girl boss energy. She speaks at last, barely above the breeze. They think I was stolen. she murmured. But I chose what came after. That's the thing about Greek myths. They rarely hand you clean answers, just variations, fragments, echoes of how people felt centuries ago. You walk with her a little longer and begin to notice the mortals gathering. They don't know who she is, but they bow. They bring offerings, pomegranates, wheat oil, honey cakes. They whisper blessings, not just for harvests, but for good deaths, peaceful deaths, unafraid deaths. She accepts them all without fanfare. You realize she doesn't rule like Hades, detached and structured. She rules like someone who has been human, who has loved, who has lost, who has stood between worlds and said yes. This is mine now. As twilight falls, she turns to leave, slipping into a shadow that blooms behind a tree. She doesn't say goodbye. She doesn't have to. You'll see her again in spring, and you'll miss her again in fall. The sky darkens to a deep bronze as you rise higher than Olympus this time, into a still vaulted space, pulsing with tension. A helmet gleams like silver fire. A spear stands perfectly upright in the air, untouched by gravity. You've entered the domain of Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, crafts cities, and a growing list of accolades that could fit a presidential resume. She notices you immediately. Not because you're loud or out of place, but because she notices everything. Your footsteps, your hesitation, the way your eyes trace the columns in her temple, calculating their weight-bearing distribution. She's already clocked your weak spots and decided whether you're worth talking to. You are, but just barely. Athena does not smile. She assesses. And the moment you start to speak, she already knows what you were going to say. You feel like you're in an interview you didn't know you signed up for with a panel of one. You take a moment to marvel at the contradictions. She's the goddess of reason and logic, and was born from Zeus's head, fully armored, with a war cry. Mainstream fact. According to myth, Zeus swallowed her mother Metis, the goddess of wisdom, fearing their child would surpass him. This worked surprisingly poorly. One day Zeus gets a splitting headache. Hephaestus cracks his skull open, and out comes Athena, fully grown, armed and furious. Historians still argue whether this myth was a metaphor for divine intellect, or just a poetic way of saying wisdom doesn't come gently. She walks you through her domain now. Past scrolls inked in languages no one remembers. Past miniature cities she builds and destroys in the span of a thought. She's not just wise, she's strategic, calculated, dangerous. You arrive at a loom. You know this one. Arachne, the mortal weaver who dared to challenge Athena in a spinning contest. Her tapestries were perfect, too perfect, and they showed gods behaving badly. Zeus, Apollo, even Athena herself. It was blasphemy rendered insult. Athena won, of course, but not by much. And she didn't just defeat Arachne, she cursed her, turned her into the first spider, left her to weave forever in silence. Quirky fact. This story was often used by Greek teachers to warn about hubris overstepping mortal bounds, but some modern interpretations suggest Athena wasn't angry at the skill. Just the truth. Spiders became sacred to her in some places, not feared, revered. You try to ask her about it, but she cuts you off with a glance. She's moved on, already parsing 10 new problems. Wars, rivalries, urban planning proposals from Corinth. She thrives on complexity, logic. But there's something colder here too. You notice that while other gods thrive on chaos, flames whine revenge, Athena thrives on control. On order so perfect it barely looks alive. She's a goddess who defends cities, but not always the people in them. She's the strategist who sees every side of a battle and yet still chooses one. She's justice, yes, but not always kindness. You wonder, does she ever rest? She catches the thought before you've even finished it. Wisdom sleeps, she says, almost amused. But not during war. And here's the irony. Athena is technically a war goddess, but she hates Ares, the other war god. She calls him reckless, loud, inefficient. You'll meet him soon. Spoiler, she's right. Historians still debate the virgin goddess label Athena carried. Was it chastity in a moral sense, or a signal that she was untouchable? Unmarried, uninterested, entirely her own force, you now stand in a circular chamber of burning oil lamps and polished bronze shields. On each one, a city, a ruin, a plan gone awry. Athena doesn't mourn losses. She studies them. She finally speaks again. Every war begins with a story someone chose to believe. You're not unsure what to say. She raises an eyebrow. You've passed her test. For now. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not incense, not olive oil, not something sacred or ancient. No perfume. Layers and layers of honeyed roses, exotic spices, and something else. Something dangerously sweet. Like longing that's been bottled and sold. You've entered the chambers of Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, and more awkward family drama than the average soap opera. She lounges on a marble divan, one leg draped over the other, draped in silk that seems to shimmer with its own mood. She sees you, of course. She sees everyone, not just their faces, but what they want, who they long for, what secret aches keep them up at night. Come in, she purrs. Let's talk about why you're really here. You hesitate. Aphrodite isn't like the others. She's not terrifying in the traditional sense. She doesn't hurl lightning bolts or raise the dead. Her power is influence, want. The way people lean closer to her without realizing. The way arguments start in her presence, over her, because of her, through her. You sit beside her. She smiles. And then you start hearing the stories. She wasn't born from parents, at least not in the usual sense. She rose from the sea, from the foam of Uranus's severed hearts. You're allowed to raise an eyebrow. Mainstream fact, in Hesiod's version, she emerges fully grown, radiant, floating towards shore like a celestial debutante with no memory and too much power. Other myths say she's the daughter of Zeus and Dionysus, because apparently even love needs a backup origin story. But no matter how she arrived, once she did, everything changed. Gods fought over her. Zeus, to prevent civil war, married her off to Hephaestus, the least flashy god on Olympus. The blacksmith, the crippled one, and Aphrodite, well, she didn't exactly stay faithful. Enter Ares, tall, brutish, a walking testosterone festival, and completely under her spell. The two carried on for years, slipping out of Olympus, hiding in clouds, seducing each other in forests, temples, and sometimes right under Hephaestus's nose. Until one day Hephaestus found out, set a trap, built a net made of invisible chains, and caught them in the act, mid-affair, tangled together. Then he invited all the gods to watch. You're not sure whether to laugh, gasp, or cringe. Quirky fact, the gods reportedly laughed. A lot. The goddesses didn't show up. Historians still argue whether this tale was meant to mock Aphrodite or elevate her. Was she a punchline or the one truly in control? She shifts beside you, brushing a rose petal from your sleeve. Love makes fools of us all. She says, then adds with a wink, some more than others. She's not just lust and affairs, though. She's also the goddess of connection, romance, the ache in poems, the agony in waiting. She blessed sailors with safe passage if they prayed with flowers. She healed marriages and ruined them. She sparked wars. You think of Helen of Troy. It was Aphrodite who promised Paris the most beautiful woman in the world. That promise, just a whisper, ignited a war that destroyed cities, cursed generations, and made epic poetry mandatory in classrooms forever. That's her power. Not strength, not strategy, just suggestion. You're starting to feel it too. Your thoughts drifting, your heart beating just a little faster. It's not lust, not exactly. It's that terrifying vulnerability that comes with being seen. She tilts her head, smiles wider. You stand up abruptly. She laughs musical and unbothered. She knows she'll always be remembered, worshipped, blamed, and if not her well, someone will mistake for her. Every crush, every tragic poem, every song you play twice in a row because it hurts just right. That's her, still lingering. You leave the perfumed fog of Aphrodite's chambers and step straight into the clang of metal on stone. Sparks fly in every direction. The air smells like molten iron sweat and burned cloth. You duck instinctively as a hammer crashes down inches from your head. You've entered the forge of Hephaestus. It's not a temple, it's a volcano, a living mountain of smoke and fire, transformed into a labyrinth of anvils, bellows, gears, and glowing furnaces. Everything here moves. Mechanisms spin without hands, doors open themselves, statues blink. It's less divine workshop and more ancient sci-fi. Hephaestus limps past you, dragging a cart of glowing bronze. One leg stiff, one shoulder-hunched beard tangled with soot and wire. You might pity him until you realize he built every terrifying thing in Olympus, including the weapons the other gods used to mock him. Mainstream fact, Hephaestus was born from Hera alone, no Zeus involved. Now, she was so furious at being cheated on again, she decided to have a child without a man. But when he was born imperfect, she threw him off Olympus. Literally, infant launched from heaven. Some say it was Zeus who threw him. Some say both parents were ashamed. Historians still argue which version came first, or whether it reflects ancient discomfort with imperfection. You watch Hephaestus move through his forge like it's an extension of his body. He commands fire and metal the way Poseidon commands water. He forged Zeus's thunderbolts. He forged Achilles' armor. He even forged mechanical women automatons crafted from gold to assist him. Their joints move with eerie grace, their voices echoing with artificial courtesy. Quirky fact, in some myths, Hephaestus also built a self-driving chariot to return to Olympus after being cast out. So yes, ancient Greece might have invented Tesla energy thousands of years early, powered by divine spite. You find it strange he's the god of fire, yet the coldest one you've met. He doesn't rage. He remembers. Every slight, every snicker. Every time someone chose beauty over brains, smoothness over skill. And yes, there's Aphrodite. Still married to her technically. But it's a joke. She never visits the forge. He doesn't ask her to. You catch him staring at a sculpture half-finished, a woman made of copper and moonlight. You wonder who she's modeled after. A dream, a memory, a fantasy of someone who might have chosen him. But he never says. He just pulls the curtain closed and moves on. You trail him to the back of the forge where something massive sleeps under a tarp. He yanks it off, and there it is. A giant bronze warrior, nearly 20 feet tall, expressionless, powered by molten ichor. Its eyes flicker. Meet Talos, one of his greatest creations. A machine built to defend Crete, to patrol coastlines, to bleed lava. You stand very still. Hephaestus built monsters. He also built miracles. Historians still debate whether the myth of Talos was early science fiction or just metaphor for unstoppable force. But when you see its hand twitch, you start to wonder. Hephaestus doesn't brag. He demonstrates. You realize that while the other gods love to meddle in human affairs, punish, reward, flirt, Hephaestus only gives tools. What people do with those, that's their problem. As you leave, the heat presses against your back like a farewell. You're not sure you will. Glance over your shoulder. He's already working again. Sparks fly. No audience. Just perfection reforged from pain. You step out of the forge and into a battlefield. Dust curls like smoke from the ground. The sky feels too close, too hot. And they're standing in the middle of it all with a sword that's much too shiny and a smirk that's far too confident. Is Ares god of war. Not strategy, not tactics, just war. Pure, violent, emotional chaos. He sees you and grins. Not because he knows who you are, but because he assumes you're impressed. He flexes subtly, of course. Everything about Ares is posture. The glinting armor, the blood-speckled cape, the helmet perched just so. Ares doesn't walk. He struts. You've met Athena, calculated, surgical, terrifying. Ares is the opposite. He charges in, shouting, frothing, glory-drunk. He doesn't plan battles, he starts them. And when it all inevitably falls apart, he blames everyone else for being cowards. Mainstream fact, despite being the god of war, Ares was deeply unpopular among the Greeks. Most city-states honored Athena as the patroness of war, not him. His cults were small, his temples few. Even his family didn't particularly like him. Zeus once said that if Ares weren't his son, he'd have thrown him into Tartarus. That's a direct quote from Dad. You watch as Ares stomps across the battlefield, yelling at soldiers who can't hear him, swinging a sword through illusions just to feel the weight. He thinks he's inspiring people. He's not. The real warriors, smart ones, pray to Athena. The reckless ones, they light a candle for Ares and hope to die before they realize their mistake. You hear a noise beside you, a groan. Ares turns annoyed. It's Phobos and Deimos, his twin sons, gods of fear and terror. They follow him everywhere like growling shadows. They don't speak, they just exist. The smell of adrenaline, the taste of dread. They're why you sometimes wake up from nightmares you don't remember. Ares keeps them close, pets them like dogs, calls them my little battle cries. Quirky fact, some regions of Thrace, a warlike northern territory, worshipped Ares more intensely than the rest of Greece. In Sparta, where boys were trained for war from age 7, there was a yearly sacrifice of dogs in his honor, because apparently that was the vibe. You crouch low now, watching him fight. And here's the twist, he's not particularly good at it. He gets injured a lot. During the Trojan War, Athena beat him in combat. Diomedes, a mortal, stabbed him with her help. He bled golden ichor, screamed like a dying bull, and ran back to Olympus to complain to Zeus. It's a recurring theme. Ares throws himself into fights, gets wounded, sulks. Wash, rinse, repeat. He's not invincible. He's just too angry to stop. And then there's Aphrodite again. The only one who seems to tolerate Ares, probably because he doesn't talk much once she kisses him. You think about their infamous affair, how Hephaestus caught them, how all the gods laughed. But Ares didn't laugh. He hates being laughed at. You watch him polish his armor now, muttering about dishonor and revenge, like a kid replaying a schoolyard insult. He wants to be respected, feared, idolized. But the truth, he's a blunt instrument in a world that worships precision. Historians still argue about his origins. Was he always Greek or imported from older Thracian and Near Eastern war gods? Some suggest he was meant as a cautionary tale, what happens when violence rules unchecked. Others think he reflects a darker truth that humans like war more than we admit. You leave the battlefield slowly. Behind you, Ares swings at ghosts and glory alike. unaware that real greatness is slipping through his fingers. He doesn't need enemies. He's already losing to himself. You don't walk into this scene, you run. You're trying to keep up with a blur of winged sandals, a cackle in the wind, and the distant sound of something expensive falling over. Welcome to the realm of Hermes, messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, thieves, liars, merchants, shepherds, poets, pickpockets, and people who talk fast and move faster. He zips past you again, barely grazing the ground. Keep up, he calls with a wink, even though you can't. No one really can. He's everywhere at once, gliding through markets, slipping past border stones, sneaking into dreams, with a smirk and a message half delivered. He's wearing a short tunic, a winged cap, and a grin that knows exactly what you're hiding in your pockets. Mainstream fact, Hermes was born to Maya, a minor goddess, and Zeus, on his first day of life. First he crawled out of his cradle, found Apollo's sacred cattle, stole them, reversed their hoof prints to hide the theft, and built the world's first lyre out of a turtle shell. By nightfall, he was already lying to Zeus and charming his way out of trouble. Zeus impressed. Apollo mad. Hermes got a promotion. That's how Hermes works. Bend the rules so well the gods have to hire you. Now you're inside one of his temples, or is it a marketplace or a back alley? With Hermes, the lines blur. Pouches jingle with coins, scrolls of contracts unroll themselves. And in one corner, someone's trying to sell a goat that may or may not belong to him. Hermes slaps a buyer on the back pockets a coin, while shaking another's hand, then catches a falling amphora without looking. He's brilliant, exhausted, borderline dangerous, but he's also essential. He carries Zeus's messages, escorts souls to the underworld, protects travelers who pray at roadside altars. He's the god of motion. If time is a river, Hermes is the current. You follow him barely as he slips into a dreamscape. One of his less-known roles is the bringer of sleep visions. He weaves dreams like cloaks, each one tailored to fit the sleeper's guilt, hope, or hidden desire. You see him hover over a soldier, whispering reassurance before battle. Over a child, whispering nonsense that blooms into poetry by morning. Quirky fact, Hermes was also worshipped as a god of boundaries, not just physical ones, but social and moral boundaries. His sacred markers, called herms, were placed at crossroads and entrances. Some were just stone columns with very prominent anatomy. Travelers would touch them for good luck, and yes, that part was usually included. Hermes notices your raised eyebrow. What? It's symbolic, he says, before vanishing again. You catch up to him, sort of just as he's settling down beside a fire. He tosses you a pouch of something sweet. Date cake, he says. Stolen, technically. But who's keeping score, you ask him sincerely. Doesn't he ever want to slow down? He leans back, staring at the stars. Slowing down is for statues, he says. I'm more of a rumor than a god. And rumors only matter when they move. You nod. It makes sense in a way only Hermes can deliver, half truth, half joke, fully profound. Historians still debate Hermes' duality, trickster or protector, liar or guide. Maybe he's all of it, wrapped in winged sandals and clever fingers. Some even say he invented language itself, which explains why you're still chasing the meaning of his last sentence 20 minutes after he disappears again. Because, of course, when you turn to look, he's gone. Just your coin purse missing, and your shoelaces tied together. You're bathed in gold, not metaphorically, literally. Sunlight hits your face like a warm slap, and a lyre twangs softly in the distance. Everything glows too much, too perfect, too filtered. You've entered the domain of Apollo, and he's already posing before you can say hello. God of the sun music, prophecy, healing plagues, because balance and basically anything involving aesthetics and grand entrances. He's reclining on a marble bench as if it's a throne. Golden curls tousle just enough to look accidental. His robe falls just so. You feel like you've walked into a painting, and he's the model and the painter. "Welcome," he says, smoothly voiced, like a flute dipped in honey. Try not to look directly at me. It's blinding. You look anyway. Mistake. It's hard not to like Apollo. He's dazzling, charming. Everything about him screams success. He plays instruments flawlessly, writes poetry that makes people weep, shoots arrows that never miss. And yet beneath the golden polish, there's something darker, flickering. He's intense, obsessive. Ego wrapped in divinity. Mainstream fact, Apollo once competed in a music contest with a satyr named Marsyas. Marsyas played the flute. Apollo played the lyre. The contest was close. Some say the satyr actually won. But Apollo, not one to lose, gracefully declared that playing upside down was a rule and flayed Marsyas alive when he failed to comply. So, yeah, classical overreaction. Follow him to Delphi, his most sacred site. It's quiet here. Still, the stone pathway is lined with offerings from kings and commoners alike. Gold, statues, hopes, fear. Because this is where Apollo speaks through the oracle. You step into the smoky chamber. The Pythia, his priestess, sits above a vent in the earth, muttering in riddles, breathing in vapors that might have been natural gas, or something far weirder. People traveled from across the known world to ask her questions. She answered cryptically, and everyone left either terrified or smugly reassured. Quirky fact. The oracle's answers were famously vague. Asked whether a man would win a war, she might say, "A great empire shall fall." The man would hear victory, but often it was his empire that collapsed. Historians still argue whether this was clever manipulation or just a brilliant way to always be right. Apollo stands nearby, arms crossed, pretending he doesn't care what mortals ask. But you can tell he listens. He wants to be needed, and not just by mortals. Let's talk about his love life. Oh boy, Apollo falls hard, fast, and catastrophically. Every time. There's Daphne, a nymph who caught his eye. She didn't return the favor, fled from him. Apollo chased her relentlessly. Just before he could grab her, she prayed to her father, a river god, and he transformed her into a laurel tree. Apollo, devastated, declared the laurel sacred and started wearing wreaths made from her leaves, which isn't exactly closure. Then there's Hyacinthus, a Spartan prince Apollo adored. They played discus one day, romantic in a way, and Apollo accidentally killed him with a poorly thrown disc. From Hyacinthus's blood, Apollo caused a flower to bloom. His way of saying sorry with petals. You're noticing a theme here. When Apollo loves things tend to die, or transform, or both. He's not malicious. He's just overpowering, like the sun. Historians still debate whether Apollo represented the ideal of masculinity in the Greek world, or a warning about unchecked ego disguised as talent. Some called him the god of balance, others of imbalance disguised as order. You walk with him one last time through a grove where laurel trees sway without wind. He plucks a branch, tucks it behind your ear. "You'll remember me," he says softly. You already do, even if part of you wants to forget. Because worshiping Apollo means risking blindness, and falling in love with him, that means turning into something else entirely. You escape the sun finally, and wander into darkness, not oppressive or grim, but cool and quiet, like the hush of a forest moments before dawn. Leaves brush your shoulders. Twigs crack softly underfoot. You've crossed into the sacred domain of Artemis. You hear her before you see her. A rustle, a breath, the twang of a bowstring. Then silence. Then whoosh, an arrow whistles past your head and buries itself cleanly in the bark behind you. You freeze, not because you're afraid, but because you know she meant to miss just barely. She steps into view, Artemis, goddess of the hunt of the moon, wild animals, childbirth, maidenhood, and unapologetic solitude. Her eyes are sharp, not cruel but alert, like a creature that's never once been surprised and refuses to start now. Don't sneak up, she says flatly, brushing past you with a quiver slung over one shoulder and a silver-bladed knife tucked into her belt. She's not interested in talking, or posing, or impressing. Unlike her twin brother Apollo, Artemis has no need to be seen. She is what she is, forest-born, fiercely independent, and as wild as the creatures she protects. Mainstream fact, Artemis was considered one of the three virgin goddesses of Olympus, alongside Athena and Hestia. But her celibacy wasn't demure. It was furious. Artemis demanded loyalty from her nymphs and took violent vengeance on anyone who violated her boundaries. You remember the tale of Actaeon, a hunter, a mortal. One day he stumbled upon Artemis bathing in a glade. He wasn't trying to spy. He just looked at the wrong moment. So Artemis turned him into a stag. Then she let his own hunting dogs tear him to pieces. Even the forest grew quiet after that. Historians still argue whether this story reflects the sanctity of female autonomy or just a divine overreaction with body horror. You're leaning toward both. You follow her deeper into the woods. It's hard to keep up. She moves like a shadow, here then gone. Sometimes she speaks, but only in clipped sentences. There are rules here, she says. You nod unsure what they are. Good, she adds. You'll live longer that way. She gestures to a clearing where a doe nurses her fawn. No sound. No movement beyond breath. You feel like you're intruding. Artemis doesn't worship nature. She is nature. Fierce, tender, unknowable. Quirky fact, Artemis was widely worshipped across Greece. But in Sparta, girls would dance armed in her honor. In Brauron, young girls participated in rituals dressed as bears, arctoi, symbolizing transformation, wildness, and readiness for womanhood. And that's part of Artemis, too. She's not just a huntress. She's a protector of girls, midwives, pregnant women, even though she never marries or bears children herself. It's complicated. You pause at a moonlit stream. She kneels there, washing her hands. You ask her gently why she keeps her distance from Olympus. She shrugs. They talk too much. You wait. Then she adds, "Besides, I like hearing nothing. It tells me what's missing." You realize now that Artemis isn't cold. She's clear. No fluff, no games. Just an oath to never be owned by a man, by a city, even by her own mythology. And those who challenge her, well, you've seen the arrow in the tree. The forest fades behind you, giving way to pounding drums, laughter that borders on hysteria, and the unmistakable slosh of wine being poured into overflowing goblets. You're not easing into this scene, you're thrust into it. Welcome to the world of Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, madness, theater, and the thin, spinning line between genius and total collapse. He spots you instantly. Ah, he shouts arms, open eyes wide with delight, and something unhinged. A new guest, don't worry, we're all mad here. You're ushered forward by a band of maenads, his wild female followers, already barefoot and singing, twirling with ivy tangled in their hair. Satyrs play pan flutes, hooves stomping in rhythm wine sloshing out of wooden cups. Everything around you pulses like a heartbeat. It's just a little too fast. This isn't just a party. It's a ritual. Dionysus doesn't do moderation. He is intoxication divine and dangerous. His presence is like the first rush of wine, warm, euphoric, then slippery, then sharp. You try to focus on his face, but it keeps changing young, old, male, feminine, joyful, wrathful. Historians still debate whether Dionysus was one god, or many, or if he was imported from Eastern cults and merged into a single shape-shifting force. What's certain is that he doesn't fit into the neat pantheon boxes. He wasn't even born on Olympus. His mother Semele was a mortal. Zeus's affair, of course. When Semele was destroyed by Zeus's true form, he rescued the unborn Dionysus and sewed him into his own thigh. Yes, that happened. So Dionysus was born twice. You follow him now, though it's unclear where. A procession winds through mountain paths, torches, glowing chants rising. One woman is laughing, one is crying, one is both. Dionysus doesn't lead with reason, he leads with release. His cult was especially beloved by the marginalized women slaves, the outcast. With him, they could let go. Scream, dance, shatter the masks society gave them. But freedom has a cost. You arrive at the story of Pentheus, a mortal king who mocked Dionysus. Called him a fraud, a drunk, a danger. Dionysus didn't smite him with lightning or plague. No, he invited him to come see the revels for himself. Pentheus disguised himself as a woman, snuck into the woods, and found himself in the middle of a Maenad frenzy. Caught spying, he was ripped apart by his own mother, who was too far gone to recognize him. She thought he was a lion. Quirky fact: in the city of Thebes, dramatic festivals honoring Dionysus were the birthplace of Greek theater. Tragedy and comedy alike emerged from his cult, because what's performance really but collective madness in costume? You now sit beside him, or maybe you're dancing, or maybe you're asleep and dreaming all this. It's hard to tell. Dionysus pours you a cup. You hesitate. It's not just wine, he says, voice low. It's permission. You take a sip, and everything becomes too much in the best and worst ways. Colors explode. Your body sways on its own. For a moment, you understand how surrender could feel like salvation. But Dionysus watches you with strange calm. Not everyone makes it back, he says almost kindly. Because here's the secret: Dionysus isn't chaos for the sake of chaos. He's what happens when the soul needs to break a little. To leak light, to fall apart so it can remember what joy feels like when it returns. You stumble from the grove as dawn rises, heart-pounding, throat sore from laughter or screaming. Dionysus waves you off, already lost in another story. You're not sure if you've been blessed or cursed. Maybe both. After the frenzy, you crave silence, and you find it warm, flickering, and deeply, almost unsettling and peaceful. You're inside a hearth, not figuratively, not in a temple. A literal hearth fireplace, stone smooth with use, flames dancing low, casting shadows like soft lullabies across clay wall. The scent of fresh bread, melted beeswax, wool drying on a hook. And in the center of it all sits Hestia, goddess of the hearth, the home domestic order, never ever being the center of attention. She doesn't notice you at first. Or maybe she does, and just doesn't care. She's stirring a pot, her motions slow, meditative. Everything about her seems still. Not boring, not plain. Still like a lake that refuses to ripple even with stones thrown in. Hestia is the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea. Older than Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, and Demeter. But she gave up her throne on Olympus voluntarily so that Dionysus could have a seat. Think about that. She stepped aside in a world full of gods clawing for attention. Mainstream fact. Every Greek home temple and even city had a sacred flame kept in her honor. She was present at every sacrifice, though she required none herself. No bloody altars, no drunken revel. Just flame. Quiet. Constant. You sit across from her now, knees drawn in like a child by a campfire. She doesn't preach, doesn't test you. She offers you food, no fanfare. A simple bowl. It tastes better than nectar. Maybe because it's real. Quirky fact, unlike most Olympian gods, Hestia has no wild myths. No affairs, no wars, no monsters slain in her name. Some scholars call her the forgotten goddess, not because she was minor, but because she was so essential that she faded into the background. Like air, like home. You begin to realize this is power too. To not need applause, to protect space, to warm it, to be the one everyone returns to without ever needing to leave yourself. She finally speaks. The hearth is the first thing lit in the house, she says softly, and the last thing extinguished. You look into the flame. It flickers and steadies. A heartbeat, and you feel safe. Hestia wasn't worshipped for adventure. She was honored in daily life, in cooking, in gathering in warmth, shared among people who care for one another. She is the goddess of staying. And staying is no small thing in a world of gods who abandon chase, conquer, destroy. Historians still argue why her cult never grew flashy. Some say she refused temples. Others say the hearth was the temple. No walls needed. You ask her if she regrets giving up her throne. She smiles, stirs the pot again, and never left. Olympus is wherever people gather kindly. You feel your chest loosen? No fear. No firestorms. No riddles. Just presence. You stand to leave, and she nods once. No blessing. No warning. Just the warmth of someone who doesn't need you to remember her name, because every home, every flame already does. The air shifts again, but this time it's thick with dust smoke, and the low, constant clatter of spears against bronze. You're in a camp. A massive one. Fires dot the landscape like watchful eyes. The tension is thick enough to slice. You've walked into history's most disastrous beauty contest. Welcome to the Trojan War. But let's rewind just a bit. It all starts at a wedding. A divine one, in fact. Thetis, a sea nymph, is marrying Peleus, a mortal. All the gods are invited, except one. Eris, goddess of discord. So naturally, Eris crashes the party and tosses in a golden apple. It's inscribed with 3 devastating words, to the fairest. What follows is cosmic pettiness at its finest. Hera claims it. So does Athena. So does Aphrodite. They turn to Zeus to decide. He laughs and punts the decision to immortal Paris, prince of Troy. Each goddess offers him a bribe. Hera promises power. Athena promises wisdom. Aphrodite promises the most beautiful woman in the world. Guess who wins mainstream fact? That woman is Helen, already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Oops. Paris sails to Greece, seduces, or possibly kidnaps Helen, and brings her to Troy. The Greeks, incensed, rally 1,000 ships. Thus begins a 10-year war that is technically about honor, but mostly about divine egos. You're now walking among the tents. Soldiers are sharpening swords. Archers string their bows. But the real war, it's happening above them in the clouds, where the gods are choosing sides like school children before dodgeball. Hera and Athena, furious at losing the beauty contest, support the Greeks. Aphrodite still smug backs Troy. Apollo joins her. Poseidon flip-flops depending on the week. Zeus for once tries to stay neutral, but fails spectacularly. Quirky fact, ancient sources describe the Trojan War not just as myth, but as quasi-history. There really was a city called Troy, and archaeological digs have uncovered layers of it. Some historians think a real conflict happened around 1200 BCE, but the truth was inflated with poetry gods and dramatic speeches. You stand beside Achilles now. He's the Greeks' greatest warrior and also a walking divine soap opera. Son of Thetis, dipped in the river Styx, invulnerable except for his heel, and of course, he's sulking. Why? Because Agamemnon, the Greek commander, took as war prize a woman named Briseis. Achilles refuses to fight. People die. Morale drops. The gods get bored and start meddling more directly. Apollo sends plagues. Athena whispers in generals' ears. Hera seduces Zeus just to distract him. You can't tell if this is a war or a really long holiday weekend gone violently wrong. Then comes the turning point. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, friend, lover, brother in arms, depending on who you ask, dons Achilles' armor and enters the battlefield to rally the Greeks. He dies. Achilles breaks. He returns to battle and slaughters Hector, Troy's champion, dragging his body around the city in grief and rage. Even the gods are horrified. You realize this war is no longer about Helen. It never really was. It's about pride. Wounds that gods and mortals alike refuse to let heal. You glance toward Troy's walls. Inside waits the horse. Yes, that horse. Odysseus' plan. Greek soldiers hidden inside. A gift accepted too easily. Troy falls. The city burns. But even then, it's not over. The gods are not finished punishing everyone. You'll see that later. Right now, the apple still gleams faintly in Eris's hand. Still fair, still worth it. You don't think so? And the gods, they never even touch the battlefield, but their fingerprints are on every sword. The battlefield fades, but the scent of ash remains, followed by something more delicate. Old clay, sun-baked dust, a quiet hum of curiosity. You're inside a simple stone house. No gods, no warrior. Just a girl, alone. Her name is Pandora, and everything's about to go wrong. You might picture her with wide eyes, a ribbon in her hair holding that infamous box. But let's correct something right away. It was a jar. The Greek word was pithos, not pyxis. A big lidded jar, heavy, earthy, practical. The box was a Renaissance translation error that stuck much like, well, everything else about this myth. Mainstream fact, Pandora wasn't just the first woman, she was the god's punishment for humanity. After Prometheus stole fire and gave it to mortals, Zeus was furious. So he had Hephaestus create Pandora, crafted from clay, shaped by divine hands, gifted by all the gods. Beauty from Aphrodite, music from Apollo, curiosity from Hermes, a little something extra from everyone. And then Zeus handed her off to Prometheus's unsuspecting brother Epimetheus, whose name literally means afterthought. You stand beside Pandora now, and she's beautiful, but not fragile. Curious, strong. Her fingers brush the jar daily. She asks questions. She hums to herself. She's not evil. She's not scheming. She's just alive. And that's what makes the gods nervous. So one afternoon, while Epimetheus is away, she finally lifts the lid. And the world changes. Sickness, death, envy, greed, hunger, pain. All the things humans hadn't known before come rushing out. The airships, the light dulls, everything innocent becomes uncertain. She slams the lid shut. But it's too late. Almost. Because one thing remains inside the jar. Hope. Not a god. Not a weapon. Just a fragile shimmer of possibility. Quirky fact, scholars have debated for centuries whether Hope's presence was a gift or another cruel trick. Was it a comfort left behind, or the final torment, something to keep mortals yearning through endless suffering? You look at Pandora, frozen in grief, hands trembling over the sealed jar. She didn't mean to do it. She wasn't warned. She was built to want to know. And isn't that human? That instinct to peek, to ask, to open. Historians still argue whether Pandora was a cautionary tale about women curiosity or divine setups. Some say she was framed, others say she was necessary. After all, without her, there'd be no stories to tell. You glance at the jar again. It pulses faintly, like a heartbeat. You're tempted. She sees you watching. Don't, she says softly. Again. But you realize you already have. Every time you ask why you are Pandora, every question, every step into the unknown, that's the curse. Your feet feel heavier now. The air is thick not with magic or incense, but with sweat, blood, and exhaustion. You've been pulled into a different kind of myth. Less divine, more dirty. No feasts, no flying sandals, just punishment, persistence, and pure muscle. This is the realm of Heracles, romanized as Hercules. But here in Greece, his name still stings with the dust of real suffering. You see him now dragging a lion carcass up a rocky slope, blood soaking into the fur like paint. His hands are torn, his tunic shredded, his face silent. Stoic, not proud, just done. You're meeting him after the worst day of his life. Mainstream fact, Heracles, the strongest man in Greek myth, murdered his wife and children in a fit of madness. But the madness wasn't his own. It was sent by Hera, Zeus's wife, who hated Heracles from birth. Why? Because he was Zeus's son, one of many. But his existence was a reminder Hera couldn't ignore. So she cursed him, and Heracles paid. To atone, he submitted to 12 labors assigned by King Eurystheus, a man so cowardly he issued orders while hiding in a jar. These weren't quests, like in fairy tales. They were setups for failure. Your journey through these labors begins with the Nemean lion, its hide impervious to weapons. Heracles strangles it with his bare hands. Then, realizing he can't skin it, he uses the beast's own claw. Quirky fact, in some depictions, Heracles wears the lion's skin afterward, not for fashion, but because it became his armor. A kind of victory trophy and security blanket in one. Next, the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with regenerating heads. Slice one off, 2 grow back. Heracles wins only by burning the stumps and getting help from his nephew Iolaus. Teamwork, it turns out, is a surprisingly rare theme in Greek myth. Labor after labor passes the golden hind, the Erymanthian boar, the Augean stables, which he cleans by rerouting a river, because of course the Stymphalian birds, the Cretan bull, the man-eating mares of Diomedes, the belt of Hippolyta, the cattle of Geryon, the apples of the Hesperides, and finally, the worst, the capture of Cerberus. You remember Cerberus. 3 heads. Guard dog of the underworld. Heracles doesn't fight him. He asks. And Hades, cold, consistent Hades, lets him take the beast as long as he uses no weapons. Heracles wrestles the dog into submission, hauling him into the daylight. It's the last labor. But Heracles' story doesn't end there, because his pain never ends. You walk beside him as he tries to start over. Marries again, fights again, is betrayed again. He's poisoned slowly, painfully by a robe soaked in the blood of a centaur. His skin peels, his body collapses, and in the end he builds his own funeral pyre. But Zeus won't let him stay dead. Heracles is deified, taken to Olympus, given immortality, married to Hebe, goddess of youth. It sounds like a reward, but it feels more like retirement. After a life defined by punishment, historians still argue what Heracles represents. Masculine ideal, endless suffering, divine scapegoat. He's mortal but not quite. Strong but tragic, revered but never at peace. You look at him one last time, not in glory, but in the quiet moment between labors, where his shoulders slump, where he asks, not aloud, but with his whole posture, how much more, and the gods, they're still watching. Always one more task, even for heroes. You step away from the roar of lions and the blood-spattered soil of labors and into something gentler but infinitely sadder. The ground here is soft, damp. The air smells like rain just before it falls, and somewhere ahead a harp string snaps. You've entered the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. It feels different here, quiet, tender, temporary. Orpheus is already playing. You see him seated on a rock near a river that barely ripples. His lyre rests in his lap, and every note he plucks sounds like something that used to be alive. He doesn't speak to you, you see. Even his grief comes out as melody. You already know why he's here. Mainstream fact, Orpheus was the greatest musician in Greek mythology. So gifted that animals, trees, even the stones would gather to listen. His music was said to make the Furies weep. And when his beloved Eurydice died bitten by a snake on their wedding day, he descended into the underworld to win her back. Alive. No hero's sword, no godly lineage, just a lyre and love. You follow him down again. The underworld opens for him not in fear, but in awe. Cerberus rests his heads. Charon the boatman offers passage without payment. The judges of the dead lean in as Orpheus begins to play. You're there when he reaches Hades and Persephone. He kneels, plays a song not of triumph, but of ache, the kind that lingers behind the ribs. His voice is low, raw, and for once the king and queen of the dead make an exception. Eurydice may follow him back, but one condition: he must not look back at her until they are both fully returned to the living world. You can already feel your chest tightening. They climb, step by step. Orpheus walks ahead. Eurydice behind him, silent, footsteps echoing. And as the first light of the upper world spills in, he doubts, just for a moment. He turns, and she's gone. Again, forever. Quirky fact, some versions of the myth say she didn't blame him, that her final look was soft, forgiving. Others say she didn't even have time to speak before she vanished like breath in winter air. Historians still debate what this myth means. Is it a warning about doubt, about disobedience? Or is it simply a story about the human need to look back, no matter the cost? You sit beside Orpheus now. The lyre is silent, his voice gone. In some versions, he's torn apart by Maenads mad women who can't stand his refusal to love again. In others, he simply wanders into the forest and disappears, humming a song only he can hear. You wonder if the gods regret this one. But they don't. This wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson that even the purest love is not guaranteed a happy ending. That even the best songs end too soon. And that sometimes almost is the cruelest word in any language. You sit in silence for a long time after Orpheus fades into the forest. His absence lingers longer than most gods' presence ever does. But you don't get long to mourn. The earth trembles subtly, then violently. You're pulled backwards, way backwards, past the familiar gods, past Olympus, past even the Titans, into a time, before light, before shape. You've arrived at the beginning of the age of the Titans, the primordial generation of gods. Here everything feels heavy, slower, more elemental. The ground groans under your feet. The air is thick with memory. You're standing on a world not yet tamed, raw, mountains, oceans that haven't decided where they end, skies that feel suspicious of you. And towering above it all, Cronus, king of the Titans. You know him. Or at least you know what he becomes the one who eats his children. Mainstream fact, Cronus overthrew his father Uranus by slicing him open with a sickle made of flint. Then, fearing a prophecy that his own children would overthrow him in turn, Cronus swallowed each one whole, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, the moment they were born. Nice family values. Only Zeus escaped, smuggled away by his mother Rhea, who gave Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead. He ate it anyway. You watch as this slow, grinding cycle of power and fear unfolds. The Titans were not tricksters, not beautiful, not even interesting. They were forces, gravity-wearing faces. Cronus embodies time and consumes itself. Rhea, motherhood and resistance. Oceanus, the boundless sea. Hyperion, the first sun. It's not a pantheon. It's a warning. And then finally, Zeus returns. With help from the 100-handed giants, the Cyclopes and his regurgitated siblings, he leads a rebellion. The war lasts 10 years. Thunder versus stone. Sky versus mountain. A cosmic civil war that tears the fabric of the world. Quirky fact. This battle, the Titanomachy, may have mirrored real political changes in ancient Greek society. Scholars argue it symbolized the shift from older chthonic earth cults to a newer sky-based Olympian religion. Titans were the before that had to be buried, so the after could exist. Zeus wins. He imprisons the Titans in Tartarus, the deepest pit beneath the underworld. Not death, not oblivion, just eternal silence. You now stand at the mouth of Tartarus, a pit so deep a bronze anvil would fall for 9 days before hitting bottom. You can't see anything, but you can feel them. Still there, still conscious, still waiting. There's something about this silence that chills you more than all the screams you've heard from Olympus. You step back. You remember that this isn't just a story of victory. It's a story of cycles. Because the prophecy Cronus feared, it came true. And someday Zeus fears the same thing. Because suns don't stay grateful forever. And the gods, they never stay unchallenged. You climb now back toward the light, but not the soft glow of hearth fires or the theatrical brilliance of Apollo's sun. This light flickers, unsteady. It dances along stone walls and curls through dark corridors that echo with half-whispers and the scent of smoke and mystery. You've entered Delphi. Not just a city, but the navel of the world, according to ancient Greeks. Sacred to Apollo, home of the most enigmatic voice in all mythology, the oracle. She sits quietly now, the Pythia, a priestess dressed in simple robes, mouth slightly open, as vapors rise from the chasm beneath her. You watch people come to her in a kind of reverent terror. Kings, generals, farmers, thieves, all seeking answers. And she answers always. Just not clearly. Mainstream fact, the oracle at Delphi was considered the most authoritative prophetic voice in the Greek world. Chosen from among the local women, the Pythia would sit above a fissure in the earth where gases, possibly ethylene, seeped up, causing trances. She would mutter chant or shout riddles later interpreted by male priests. You listen as one man asks if he should attack his rival city-state. She replies, "A great empire shall fall. Triumphant, he marches to war. His empire is the one that falls." And yet he cannot say she was wrong. Quirky fact, people often paid for their questions and offerings, coins, treasure, even livestock. And the wait could take days. The Pythia only answered questions on specific days, at specific times, after specific rituals. Prophecy, it turns out, has office hours. You peer closer at the oracle. Her hands tremble. Her voice is not loud, but it moves, like wind through leaves, like memory through grief. And suddenly you understand the gods do not give clarity. They give reflection. The oracle doesn't shape fate. She shows it like moonlight on a lake, wobbly, beautiful, impossible to grab. Historians still argue whether the Pythia's utterances were politically manipulated, psychically inspired, or chemically induced. maybe all three, maybe none. You watch as another supplicant enters. He's young, shaking, eyes wide. He whispers, "Will I die tomorrow?" The oracle's lips part. Her voice spills out like incense. Tomorrow comes for all men, but not all men come for tomorrow. You can't tell if it's cruel or kind. You leave the chamber through torchlit halls where echoes linger like perfume. The walls are covered in inscriptions, fragments of wisdom scratched in by those hoping to remember, "Know thyself." Nothing in excess. Even the gods envy those who ask nothing. You glance back once. The Pythia is silent again, eyes closed. But you know she's still listening. You blink and suddenly you're no longer walking sacred stone paths or listening to oracles. You're in the marketplace, the temple, the shipyard, the kitchen. You're among the mortals now. And you're starting to realize something the myths don't always say out loud. For all their thunderbolts and jealousy, their dramas and seductions, the gods needed worship. And mortals, they gave it. Welcome to the strange world of divine fandom, ancient Greek style. You move through the city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes. Each one has its favorite gods, and they treat them like celebrities on very uneven mood swings. You pass altars to Athena, sacrifices to Apollo wine, poured for Dionysus cows, burned for Hera, prayers whispered to Hades quietly, so he doesn't notice you too much. Mainstream fact religion in ancient Greece wasn't centralized. There was no single Bible, no priest-king issuing decrees. Worship was local, practical, and transactional. You gave offerings so the gods would give something back, or at least not ruin your crops. You approach a temple, tall columns, flaking paint goats bleeding nervously nearby. A man's about to offer a chicken. Another kneels begging for a safe voyage. You realize no one's asking for enlightenment. They want weather, fertility, victory, or at minimum, not to be cursed. It's familiar, even now. You glance down an alley and find a small, grimy shrine. It's dedicated to Hermes. Travelers leave tiny shoes. Thieves leave coins they've stolen, or pretend they did. In another square, a girl lights candles for Artemis before her wedding night, not for blessing but for protection. You step into a house and see a small flame burning. Hestia's. The family eats with her watching. They toss crumbs into the fire. She's not a name, they barely say it. She's just there. Quirky fact in public ceremonies, even if the ritual was for another god, Hestia always got the first and last offering. She was the spiritual parentheses to every divine sentence. You begin to see how mortal love shaped the gods. The more people prayed, the stronger the myths grew. Some gods got reinvented depending on the region. In Sparta, Ares was honored. In Athens, mocked. In Delphi, Apollo was holy. In other places, kind of a diva. There were cults not sinister, just localized clubs of worship. The Eleusinian mysteries for Demeter, Orphic cults for Dionysus, secret handshakes, midnight rituals, cryptic initiation rites. It wasn't about spectacle, it was about belonging. And sometimes the worship got weird. You pause outside a festival of Dionysus. People wear masks. They stagger, weep, howl, and sing. Is it theater, prayer, grief? All three. One scholar once said the Greek worship wasn't about morality. It was about honoring forces beyond your control. Gods didn't care if you were good. They cared if you were respectful. You leave the city and walk along a dusty road. A herdsman kneels at a herm, a stone marker with Hermes' distinct anatomy front and center. He whispers something into the wind, drops a coin, moves on, and that's it. No lightning, no choir, just the hope that someone heard. Because worship wasn't about certainty. It was about trying to survive, trying to please, trying not to be noticed by the wrong god on the wrong day. You realize as the dust settles around your feet, gods may be immortal, but belief, that's what kept them breathing. You look around, the temples crumble, the altars crack. The fires and hearths go cold, not all at once, but slowly like a tide going out. The gods aren't gone, but they've gone quiet. You're now standing at the edge of time, watching the fade that strange, sacred moment when myths lose their believers and become stories instead of realities. Welcome to the end of Olympus, but not the end of meaning. Mainstream fact, by the 4th century, AD Greek pagan worship is being systematically replaced by Christianity. Emperor Theodosius III issued decrees banning sacrifices and shutting down temples. The oracle at Delphi stopped speaking. The flame of Hestia extinguished. The gods didn't fight back. They simply left the stage. You wander through the ruins of Delphi, now overgrown with vines and goats. The wind whistles through broken columns. Someone once chanted here. Now it's just a tourist stop with a plaque. And yet, people still whisper their names. You see them in statues, Apollo beautiful and blank, Athena wise-eyed and still watching, Hermes with that sly smirk carved into marble, even Dionysus smiling faintly from a wine-stained mosaic. The worship is gone, but the story survives. You walk through a dusty library, scrolls and texts stacked to the ceiling. Scribes once copied Homer, Hesiod, Pindar. In time, monks would do the same, not out of reverence, but for record-keeping. Myths became literature. Quirky fact. Many Greek myths were preserved not by pagans, but by Christian scholars who considered them important for understanding rhetoric, ethics, or human folly. That's how the gods survived through irony, protected by the very belief system that replaced them. You now sit at the edge of a hill. Below, people build churches, cities, empires. But look closer. A soldier wears a helmet modeled after Ares. A mother leaves olive oil on a windowsill, Athena's favorite. A girl whispers to the moon before bed. She doesn't say Artemis's name, but she doesn't have to. Because here's the truth, the gods were never just beings. They were ideas. And ideas don't die. They morph. They migrate. They linger in dreams, in literature, in phrases like Achilles' heel or Pandora's box, in every story where beauty causes disaster, where the wise woman sees too much, where the trickster wins, then vanishes. Historians still argue, did the gods ever truly exist? You know the answer now. They existed as long as we believe they did. And in a way, they still do. Because you followed them here, to the end. And they followed you, not as lightning bolts or statues, but as metaphors, as mirrors, as whispers in your own mind that say, what if you stand now, alone on the hilltop, but you feel something shift behind you? A breeze, a voice? Or maybe it's just Athena, still watching. The world is quiet now. Not silent, never truly silent, but hushed. Like a candlelit room after the last guest has left. You're no longer in myth or city or temple. You're in memory. The place where all stories go when no one's left to swear they were real. You're standing at the edge of a world that has told you everything, and yet still hasn't let go. But there's one last thread to follow. You. Because here's the twist. Most myths never say out loud the gods weren't just up in the clouds. They were in people, in their choices, in their disasters, in their stubborn hope. You think about the mortals we met along the way, Pandora, who opened the jar because she had to know. Orpheus, who looked back because he couldn't not. Heracles, who kept going even when the punishment never stopped. Persephone, who walked between life and death and never let either own her. They weren't just victims of divine whim. They mirrored it, reflected it, channeled it. You sit down now and you can feel the echo of God's in your own breath. Not because you're divine, but because you're human. And that's always been the point. Mainstream fact. The Greeks didn't worship gods because they were perfect. They worshiped them because they were recognizable, messy, moody, prone to holding grudges and making mistakes. They were bigger versions of ourselves, sacred in their flaws, aspirational in their drama, comforting in their imperfection. That's what kept them alive, and what keeps them whispering still. Quirky fact. In some fragments of later Greek poetry, the gods themselves beg to be remembered. Speak my name one line reads lest I fade. But you've done that, haven't you? You've followed them, listened to them, judged them, laughed at them, maybe even pitied them. And in doing so, you've carried them further than any temple ever could. You look around. No throne, no thunder. Just the sound of your own heartbeat echoing in a story that has taken millennia to tell. You smile just a little. Because even if the gods don't answer anymore, you understand why people asked. And maybe tonight someone else will whisper their names too, just to see if the old stories still breathe. They do. You just heard them. Word count 109 to 3. Wind down 300 words, so now the flames are low. The gods have told their tales loud, flawed, furious, and left you here at the edge of it all, where belief fades into sleep and memory begins to hum beneath your skin. Your breath slows. The names still linger: Athena, Apollo, Hera, Hades. They drift now like echoes through olive groves, like myths wrapped in the warmth of old stone and sea wind. But you don't have to carry all of it tonight. Let the stories rest. Let Heracles set down his lion skin. Let Persephone walk into spring without a crown. Let Zeus, well, maybe don't let him do anything without supervision. The past is never gone. It simply waits in quiet corners inside libraries and lullabies and the lines between waking and sleep. You were never alone in this story. You never will be. So breathe in and breathe out. Whatever storm chased you today, leave it at the temple gate. Whatever question curled in your chest, let it unfold like smoke. Because right now, you're not in a myth. You're in a moment. Still, soft, safe, and somewhere far off, the gods are watching. Not to punish, not to meddle, but just to see if someone remembers. You do. So let the darkness come gently. Let your thoughts dim like stars fading at dawn. And rest. You've wandered through Olympus and back. The gods can wait. Sleep now.